No, like
All right. Thank you everyone for coming. Join me in welcoming Mike Chiu. Mike comes to us with a strong background in branding and digital communication as well as UX and product design. He's worked for companies like currently he's at Dropbox, Apple, what else?
SAP, Citibank, a bunch of blue chip.
And then he also has a wide freelance practice working with companies like 100 Thieves, 88 Rising, the other ones.
Acronym.
Sorry, I need to look on my
That's where it gets more interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Mike is wonderful. Comes to us from Canada, and join me in welcoming Mike.
So I actually have a lot of experience with CME design students. Caleb actually interned at Dropbox. Grace Lee, if you know her, is a current employee on the same team as me. I'm actually working with Jessica Lai on a different project, which is really exciting. She works for a company called Daybreak, so I'll talk about that. But yeah, a lot of you are going to change the world, I know it. Just because they're excellent design students, you guys are going to be designing the next interfaces for Apple, the next dashboards for Rivian, probably the next homing missile for Lockheed Martin. I didn't say everyone would change the world for the better, but when I was trying to decide what to talk about, I think I've attended a lot of these talks, and they end up being like a case study circle jerk in a way. And I think that when I was in school or when I was in your position, those types of talks were always very impressive, but I didn't even know what my next week was going to look like. I didn't have my portfolio together. I didn't have a website. I still don't have a website, but that stuff might have been impressive, but it wasn't very useful. So what this talk will be is my journey into design, my point of view on how to navigate the space, some anecdotal thoughts about design, and I think most importantly, some hard truths that no one told me when I started. So hopefully that's the most important part for y'all. What it isn't is, like I said, a portfolio case study. That being said, I have included some of my work. It's not meant to brag, but I think seeing my taste in the way I design is important for you to make your own judgment, because you might hear what I say and then you like the work and you're like, okay, yeah, you know what, maybe I will listen to this guy. If not, you can make your own decision and be like, this guy's full of shit, I don't want to listen to him. So it's up to you to make that choice. It's not the right advice. There's no right call or right decision you can make. Everyone has to sort of do that for themselves. I'm just letting you know how I did it. And it's definitely not meant to be serious. If you want to interject, if you want to put your hand up, please do. Cool. So, CMU, my name's Mike. I'm a graphic designer from Toronto. That's Toronto, Ontario, Canada, up north, the 6th, as many people might know it. And I specialize in brand and interactive design. Okay, lesson 1. You're not your job. I think creative types tend to conflate their work and their ego, and they put it all into these projects, and they spend so much time on it, and then inevitably, when someone says, your work is bad, it's like so soul-crushing, right? You're like, oh, that must mean I'm bad. I spent so much time on this. So lesson number 1, you're not your job. I think it took me a really long time to understand that. I know it's probably hard to, like, especially with the capstone projects and me sitting in on all the portfolio reviews, it's hard to divorce yourself from that. But the sooner you learn that you are not your job, the better off you'll be. Okay, so let's start this again. CMU, I'm Mike. I'm a video game nerd, anime enthusiast, DJ, foodie, fashion enjoyer, learning Japanese, who happens to make pictures for a living. Emphasis on that last part because that's what I just happen to be. Okay, so U of T, this is the University of Toronto. I actually dropped out of here. I started out as a life sci major, and I think, you know, going through high school, I had like a very atypical experience. I think I didn't try very hard and I kind of got low A's. So I was like, yeah, you know, it STEM's for me. Got in there, got a swift kick to the butt and realized that, whoa, I cannot hang here. The one beneficial part about going to the University of Toronto was, I guess, the way I filled out my dorm application. I ended up on like the messy floor, so that's where all the art kids were at. And that's really when I learned about design. Like growing up, I truly had no grasp of what that is. And I actually hated school. I wasn't ever really a great student. And I remember when I dropped out in the middle of second year, I was feeling really, really lost. So I took a year off, worked on my portfolio, went to this place. That's literally like pencil crayons holding up a box. So that's where I went to school. I wasn't a remarkable student. That's the Ontario College of Art and Design. I didn't try very hard, and I worked at a menswear boutique in Toronto called Nomad, where I got a lot of exposure to cool people, cool clothing, cool design, but I always had one step out the door. I was never fully in. I was never fully sold on design. And I think, you know, a lot of people, when I talk to them, including CMU lecturer, series alum Eric Chiu, who's a friend of mine, you know, these people were born to be designers. They like came out of the womb kerning type and understanding like Gestalt theory or whatever, and you know, that just wasn't me. I don't even have a website, like I said. So I was not born a designer. I didn't understand what design was, but I think one thread that I have throughout my whole career is that I knew what I liked. So I really like Japanese role-playing games at the top. PlayStation 2, Final Fantasy X. I played a lot of rhythm games like Dance Dance Revolution. I really like fighting games. Really like games, as you can see. Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I was really into anime and sort of this like crazy distorted aesthetic. But I also had like an interest in fashion designers like Rick Owens and like Andy Milameister. And I've always loved trance music, electronic music. So I guess repetitive tasks is something I've always been into. So remember this slide. I want you to picture it because I will be bringing up these references later. So remember these things. So, Mike Chiu, the corporate designer. Here's some of the brands I've worked for. I've completed projects with them. Apple, you know, you gotta throw this on the website just because it impresses people. Apple, I really learned about negative space and good asset creation and what that means to let those things breathe. AT&T, I learned about sort of big marketing campaigns and what it means to truly work with a big budget. I did a lot of stuff there. Citibank, I actually started my career as a product designer. So I did product design in fintech for Citibank for 3 years. SAP, I didn't learn much. And McKinsey and Co., I helped with the rebrand, which happened quite a few years back, and that was a big project. So currently I am an ACD, Associate Creative Director, or Staff IC, depending if how you want to split it, at Dropbox. It's a company in SF. We specialize in file storage and much more. So when I think about what I actually get to do, it's pretty fun. I'm on the brand team, and the brand team is one of the most horizontal functions in the whole company. I get to work on things like marketing. So this is a new product we're launching called Dropbox Dash. We just did a Times Square takeover in collaboration with McLaren for any automotive heads. So that was really exciting. I get to work on things like the website, so people who are into web design, systems design, stuff like that. This might be of interest to you, super corporate, but like understanding how to build things at scale, how to build a website for, you know, that gets translated into 30 different languages, that gets seen by millions of people a month, so understanding that. I also get to sort of think about how the product looks and feels and make sure that it doesn't just look like any sort of generic Microsoft product. But yeah, it's great because I get to touch all these surfaces and even design thinking, the people who are very right-brained, right? Yeah, right-brained. Like thinking at scale, like thinking in systems. As a brand person, I get to look at all that. So very excited. But on the other hand, I've always had this online brand, Mike Sunday, I put a TM, the Internet Creative. And this is where I've got to work with some really killer consumer brands. Acronym is a techwear brand. They do a lot of really cool functional clothing, very expensive clothing. Braille is a second-hand marketplace for designer clothing. Nike, I should hope you know. 100 Thieves is a gaming company out in LA. I get to work with their hardware department, specifically High Ground, so designing keyboards and mice with them. And then 88 Rising, which is a record label that specializes in Asian voices, and they're based out of LA as well. So I get to work with a lot of cool stuff. So you saw kind of what this corporate design side looks like, and I have that part of my brain. But then in my freelance practice, I get to do stuff like this. So this was for the Acronym Asus laptop that I was a part of. This is a livery for an electronic Porsche that I designed. This is the cover for a breakcore compilation album called Dream Station. So this was like a fun project. TSM is a gaming, Team Solo Mid is a gaming team. They have a lot of gaming teams actually, but this was specifically for their Apex Legends team when they won the international or the championship. We did a collection with them. So that's part of the graphic pack. This is some of my more experimental stuff, so playing with collage, bringing in that anime influence, that sort of maximalist Jet Set Radio Future idea, how that sort of comes to life. This was a Sonic and Dreamcast collaboration that I designed for High Ground, which is that company owned by 100 Thieves. For the industrial designers out here, this is a bear brick I did. It was like a really simple idea, and I'll come back to this point later, but if anyone's familiar with what a zebra analysis is, it's how like a computer sort of registers curvature in 3D objects. So we actually got a car detailer to paint this by hand, and it kind of looks like chrome in a way, and it's just a magnificent piece to see in real life. So that's like a toy that I designed for a Tokyo exhibition. So pretty much throughout my entire career, I never could picture a world where these things have started to come together. And I think I always, and even seeing a lot of the work that people presented today, it feels very compartmentalized. People have their like cool poster design and their photography and the stuff they like to do for fun. And then they have this like buttoned up corporate, I just did this stuff through IDEO type thing. And that's great. And I felt like I had to separate those things for a long time, but I'm here to tell you it's possible. It's possible to combine the two. And I think it took a lot of confidence, and it took a long time for me to be more confident in my skills, but eventually they're coming together, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I've sort of always hid that freelance side because I wanted to be taken seriously. I wanted to be known as like an Apple designer or like a Dropbox designer. But the reality is the things that have kept me creative and essentially keeping my ear to the ground that has kept my taste in check is actually what corporations want. So don't neglect that side of you. I think it's really important. Cool. On to the next. So I guess my big question for y'all is, I know the top may feel very aspirational and clean, but why can't product design or why can't corporate design look like something like that? Okay, so I think this is an awesome diagram that I found on X or Twitter by someone named Matthew Vernon. And I've never really seen modern practices be described like this, and I think it's not ironic, but it was great that I found this on X because understanding where culture propagates, I think, is a big part of what makes my practice unique, and probably a lot of you when you start to navigate that. And I think as young creatives, it's easy to think of this as a very terrifying time. It is. I mean, look at what's going around in the world. But it's also one of the most liberating. And being able to consume and understand and utilize culture, I think, is an opportunity that you all have that hasn't really been presented before. This bottom circle, the Venn diagram, I don't really code. I don't do anything with hardware, really. I don't do 3D rendering or anything like that. But also, too, I didn't want to discount that because understanding how these types of technologies work will help you sort of communicate with other people, tell better stories. So it's really important. I didn't want to cut that out. But if I had to really I guess, refine that diagram. Here's me. So memes, brand, design, culture, me in the middle. Very simple, blue, circles, type. Remember this, okay? Remember this throughout the presentation. And I think one of the reasons why I love memes so much as a form of like information propagation is because it actually requires so much cultural awareness, emotional intelligence, and if you think about it, it's kind of like design, right? Like, it's very democratized. You have to understand these set of rules, like how a meme works, why it's funny, and then you keep on doing variations, and then it sort of spreads similar to how any good design would. So, okay, first point. I feel like I'm kind of dragging actually, so I might pick it up a bit. We'll see. I don't want to speed through it. University did not prepare me for the real world. I think, you know, when I was doing my undergrad, I still very much thought design was about making record covers and doing zines, and like editorial layouts and pamphlets and stuff like that. And I was really under the illusion that an internship would fall into my lap, and this was 100% not the case. I think those are still what design is about, but I also don't think you're going to have any favors by me sugarcoating it, so let's get into it. There is often a discrepancy between what you're taught in classrooms and what you're told makes you an excellent student, because a lot of the times you pay a lot of tuition, and so like having these types of cerebral conversations, or like what is design, like these really high level questions help validate tuition costs, to be quite frank. But when I first started, it was the exact opposite. So you can see here, hard skills, I'm calling them hard. Not like they're actually hard to do, but hard skills. Photoshop, Figma, Illustrator, deck making, style frames. Softer skills, business acumen, people management, creative direction, pitching. A lot of the classes that I had at the time were much more indexed on the softer skills to justify big, tenured salaries. When in reality, when I got into the industry, I was only looked at for hard skills. And you might want to, do the blue line and show off like just how genius you are. But in reality, when you're a junior designer and you're being hired to come in and make a deck, and someone sees something in you that they want to foster, you're being brought in for the hard skills. The irony is, as you go throughout your career, they kind of invert. And so you might love being an IC, but you also might simultaneously feel pressure to start pitching and start understanding about business and start people management. And that's kind of where great designers go to die. It sounds bleak. There's a bit of an upside to that, and I think nowadays people are realizing that, why are we turning all our brilliant ICs into people managers? It doesn't make sense. So there's still hope. But there was a huge discrepancy between what I was told. Yes.
Sorry, what's an IC?
Yeah, good question. Sorry, that is so industry lingo that I am in my own head. An IC is an individual contributor. So most likely, if you end up working for a tech company or an agency or some sort of creative technology company, you will start as an IC, and then somewhere down the path, you might split into a management role. But an IC is just a very generic way to talk about someone who just works. They don't manage people, they do the work. And it used to be that they weren't separate tracks. I think a lot of people with closer to my age or older who has agency experience has probably felt like they needed to go into the people management route to progress, have to get in front of clients, have to do a lot of talking. But some of the most brilliant designers I know are terrible at that stuff. And it's nice that the mentality has changed around that. Don't force people who aren't good at talking to people to talk to people. If they're really brilliant at making decks or really brilliant at Photoshop, don't force them into these types of scenarios. I hope that answers your question. Does it? Okay, great. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so meme number one. What you project, you become. So the unfortunate reality is, and I feel like this is not something that people talk about, is virtue signaling becomes the meta layer of being what's seen as a good designer. And the unfortunate reality is, doing a good job does not mean you will get good work. It's just not how it works. And so if you see the red part here, the, the blue section is what I was told would get me a job in the creative industry. Having a good eye, proficiency with a few good tools, being able to rationalize design decisions, and showing process. A lot of you showed me process today in the portfolio review. Great stuff. But in reality, look at the red. Look at the red. That's the stuff that gets you more work. And it's an unfortunate reality. Clout chasing, hiding the fact that you have rich parents, being able to make TikToks. It's like, why is that the stuff that gets you work? But it's true, and it's just unfortunate. So that's like the first really hard to swallow pill that I have. Oh, sorry. The reality is as well, and you know, this might fall on deaf ears, but when I talk about rich kids, there is like a certain privilege they have in understanding on how to speak up and how to speak corporatese that is just baked into how they grew up. So even if you're the best designer, if you don't understand how to communicate upwards and to like upper management and stuff, inherently you will suffer. I know it sucks, but you gotta work on your presentation skills. Okay, so this is kind of like a meta meme. You're gonna meet a lot of people who believe their accomplishments were earned by meritocracy. And what I mean by that is they're gonna feel like they worked twice as hard as you, so they deserve that promotion, they deserve double the salary. They're under the illusion that it's simply their hard work that has gotten them to where they are today. And of course, that discounts all socioeconomic factors. So that's what I'm talking about with like the rich kid stuff. Just because you know, your dad knows the head of design at Uber, and then you got an internship. Or it's like, if you're not white, like imagine, like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a lot of white and Asian faces. So just understand what that means when it comes to your privilege or whatever. Okay, so you also need a lot of people who try and poverty cosplay, as I put it lightly. You're going to meet a lot of gatekeepers who try and belittle your vision because you didn't suffer like they did or go to the same school as you. That's all bullshit. Do not let people talk down on you just because they had to go through a grueling internship and they had to work 80 hours a week does not mean you do. I'm here to tell you that the cycle of violence can end.
Oh, hey, this is Mike, and here are my 4 tips to become super good at graphic design. Tip number 1, never cite your sources. Good designers copy, great designers steal. Mood board, remix, and borrow, but never admit it. Even if you get caught, pretend like you have no idea what people are talking about, or say it's part of the cultural zeitgeist. Tip number 2, and this one's really important, farm internet clout. Being a good designer is all about being followed by other good designers. Remember, posting work doesn't get you more work, being a niche internet micro-celebrity does. Tip number 3, wear designer clothing. In a perfect society, graphic design wouldn't even exist, so it's our job to keep feeding the capitalist agenda as an act of self-preservation. And finally, tip number 4, have rich parents. Nothing will allow you to take on pro bono work, artistic risks, and month-long sabbaticals finding inspiration like having a safety net. I would highly recommend this. Follow for more tips and tricks.
Okay. I'm glad that hit. I was like, if this one doesn't work, this is going to be a long presentation. Okay, so there are always 2 ways to tell a story. I think it's really important to be able to tell them in an authentic way and bring people along for the journey. But it's also important to use your own sort of vernacular. And I talked about being able to speak corporatese and stuff, but there is something to be said about, you know, telling things authentically. And at the end of the day, you know, you might have these metrics when you start doing design or whatever, and people aren't swayed by the facts. They're swayed by stories. They're swayed by emotions. And good storytelling will allow you to punch above your weight. I'll elaborate on what that means a little bit more, but long and short, lore matters. I can show this because it's no longer in my portfolio. It's thank God long out of my portfolio. But this is a product I helped design with Citibank. It's the only corporate example I have in here, so hear me, okay? It is a product that helped people with low financial literacy pay down their debt. Obviously a corporate scam, but Yeah, credit card companies are just like loan sharks essentially. But here's the thing. Visually, I don't think it looks that great. It's pretty corporate, it's pretty dated. There was very low adoption rate. There's not a lot to talk about. But here's how I wrote about it in my book. And, you know, I wove a story about how it showed the difference between intuition-based design versus analytic-driven design, and like how Citibank was interested in like improving the financial health of their customers. They're not, for the record. But I think it's like, when I talk about the two sides of the story, it's always interesting that even though I wasn't happy with that work, a lot of you will come into opportunities where you don't have work that you're feeling necessarily super proud of, or it's like really stunning, or they might not be like great adoption metrics or anything like that. So understanding how to tell a compelling story is going to be really, really important for when you have work that you feel like isn't really able to take you to the next level. Here's some more freelance stuff. This is a company, a fashion label called Spencer Badoo. So this was like a graphic collection that I did for them. So obviously a lot more different, but pretty cool, experimental. And you know, on paper it's just a graphic collection to round out whatever season it was. But when I do tell this story, I talk about how it was featured in all these magazines, and how Trippie Redd was like rocking my design, and how Essence featured it on their homepage, and how it was even knocked off on Taobao. So I think that type of rhetoric and that type of storytelling is like infinitely more interesting than just saying, hey, I designed a fashion capsule, or I did a graphic design or merch. Okay, so UX conundrum. A lot of new grads. Yeah, I just want to check this one. Oh no. Okay. Damn. Okay. A lot of new grads and not so new grads ask me about switching into UX design. It's probably my most commonly asked question. And UX design has gotten very fuzzy. I don't think it's very clear. When I was in school, it was a lot more clear. Here to answer that for you. 2012 to 2018, it was like a gold rush. People were coming in from all sorts of disciplines, doing like a 6-month boot camp, and they were getting sort of like really cushy jobs. Inevitably, you ended up seeing a lot of bloat in the industry, and a lot of senior people at like Meta, Amazon, disguised as like creative directors, art directors, all that, and really at best, they're people managers. So when people ask me about switching into UX design, I like to bring up this story. Actually, I'd be curious. How do people hang up the phone here? Yeah, okay. Kind of split. I don't know, I feel like you were going to do this. Maybe? Okay, anyway. So the point I'm trying to make is younger people have grown up with devices and UX and patterns so ingrained into their just everyday that their understanding of UX is way more than any like engineering person or like whoever did their master's in human whatever. I'm gonna get beat up after this. So similar to AI or like blockchain or any sort of emerging technologies, it's never the generation that invents it that is truly going to be the one to revolutionize the technology. And similar to that, I think, like UX, if my generation or older invented UX, it's not going to be us that revolutionize it. It's the people that use phones, grew up with iPads when they were 2, that are just going to understand UX so much more and be able to come up with these interesting thought paradigms. So my hot take is, don't take a UX course, just do it. Let's see what that means, and see some examples where it may or may not work. So this is, I think, a good example of what I like to call convergent UX. And if anyone's familiar with Shopify, shout out Canada, that's a big Shopify, Canadian tech brand. They are kind of I think they probably have like 85 or higher % market share place for e-commerce websites, or whatever it is, super high. And this is what their checkout looks like. If anything deviates from this standard pattern on a checkout, there will be a drop in completion rate. And that's an interesting thought. I think there's still room for like deep UX researchers, but general UX design is so endgame right now. It's so late stage capitalism. It's so figured out that you're actually seeing the opposite. When people try and get clever, when people try and deviate from the shop in front checkout, you're going to actually see worse UX. And so a lot of you will end up going into web design. I've actually redacted a lot of the logos here, but usually websites are made now from very generic like templates. The content is going to be handed to you by people who don't even know what good design is. And all of these factors are outside of your control. So when I see even the hero module, like the first thing that you see, these are all virtually the same. You have a headline with a sans serif type, you have a CTA or a button, and you kind of have like the product in a way. Not very inspiring. So what are the things that we can do to combat this? Okay, meme number 3 or something. So how can we make design memorable? You know, I see a lot in talking to you all. A lot of people are worried about like type, hierarchy, space, rhythm. These are all things worth exploring. But at the end of the day, and I can tell you this from experience, that middle stuff, it's great. When you're cutting your teeth, learn it, understand it. But making it look good is so beyond important, and it's not even something that you can really quantify. And what makes something look good, you'll develop that over time, and we can talk about taste in a bit. So, okay, let me see if I can actually pull this up. I might, let me see if I can actually pull up the real website here, because it's kind of anticlimactic when you know what, I'm going to screw it up. Okay, forget it. So this is the brand site that I'm developing with Daybreak, which is a development studio in Toronto, and that's where Jessica works. So we are co-creating this, and it's a really exciting expression of brand, and just breaking a lot of the UX norms, simply because we can. And it's you know, there's no sort of metrics tied to this. We don't need click-through rates. We're hiding all these like crazy Easter eggs, and working with really great devs, I think makes a massive difference. But actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull it up because that's more impressive. You can actually see the websites. Oops. Oh, what have I done? Boomer moment. Okay, maybe I won't. I'll show it after. Once I'm out of this presentation. And oh my god, I realize we're running on time. Caleb, what time are we going?
You're fine on time.
We're good? Okay, cool. Connecting the dots. So first and foremost, I think the culture and just where we're at, it's very easy to think about the future of design and also the future period as very bleak. And I think you see that with like a lot of trends. Everything's like nostalgia core or like 90s coded or like Y2K aesthetic. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that no one has anything to look forward to anymore, so they look to the past. That's why we're seeing trend cycles be so, like they're so rapid. And I think there's, especially among creatives and people in design, there is like a general doomer mentality. I don't know if it's because just the stuff we see or we're like constantly consuming things. But yeah, it's easy to see the state of the industry and see that it's bleak. Companies are doing layoffs left and right. They're always reverting to sort of the easiest solution because they don't have budgets. They aren't willing to take risks. And design as a whole feels like it's dying. So you can see here, even like, you know, half of you might do awesome, cool record label stuff, and the other half of you will sell your soul and go down the street and go work at Google and get your nice little TC. But at the end of the day, we all still feel the same about design. So, this one's a deep cut. I don't know if people understand this one. And so, among the doomers are what I like to call the starving designers, people who will bleed for their craft, and they always seem to be doing all this amazing work, these crazy experimental typographic things and zines with no economic merit, and you just can't figure out how they make the math work. Like, man, what do they have that I don't? Like, I don't understand. Like, I got paid $200 to do a poster. Clearly, they didn't. So, like, just trying to make that make sense. And I'll tell you this right now, doing cool rave posters and stuff like that, it doesn't pay much. And if you see someone who seems to have a constant stream of income to fund their lavish, digital, nomadic lifestyle, be wary. There is an imposter among us. I'm here to tell you that 9 times out of 10, these people don't exist. And no one is out here not eating because they want to keep paying Adobe. Most of us will have to work part-time or even full-time while we work on their craft. And there's nothing wrong with this. I think it's really important to note that. Social media will have you feeling like there is something wrong. Don't be fooled. People who have safety nets are the ones that will make you spiral. So, I'm here to be optimistic about design. I think that I've spent a lot of time poo-pooing the industry and where it's at and the uphill battle that you all have, but there is an upside. And with so many boring things having been done, so many Shopify checkouts, you have a chance to do something interesting because everyone else is doing boring, so why do it? This is kind of like a cheesy idiom that's used in sort of like advertising, marketing, and design world, but I still think it's excellent. And any two seemingly unrelated things can be connected. It's just up to you to connect them. This is like an exercise that I do with some of my interns. I don't actually think I'm going to do it now because 1, it requires audience participation, and 2, I still have a lot to get through. But the way that exercise goes is I give someone 2 of these seemingly unrelated or like an unrelated object, and then I give them a brand. You can do this on your own time. See if you can just use ChatGPT or something and come up with a list of random stuff. But they have to either come up with like a product or come up with a advertisement or a campaign as to why the Bank of America might give away toothpaste, or why Tide might be doing a headphone, or why Kellogg's might be doing furniture. And I've done this, this exercise before, and I've gotten just some really, really creative answers. Like the first one that sticks out for me, it's like, well, with good dental hygiene, think about all the money you're going to be saving. Why not throw that into like a 401k at Bank of America? That type of out-of-the-box thinking, or at least non-linear in my eyes, was just like really refreshing, really creative. And I encourage everyone to keep doing these types of thought exercises because it's so easy to just default and let the old neurons keep firing. Do stuff like this. It'll make you smart. Okay, one sec. I need to have a sip of water. I'm not sure. This is a project I did, or I helped with, and it's for all the industrial design nerds out here. It is a company called Acronym, which is a techwear company. We collaborated with Asus ROG, Republic of Gamers, which is a gaming hardware company. And the back is just like crazy. It was designed in collaboration with my friend Raf, who is Yale grad, I believe. And then also the industrial design part, like the actual modeling, was done by someone named Phil Saunders, who designed the Iron Man suit, which is just like an absolutely star-studded roster. So it's like this crazy portable laptop, and I'm just going to show you some demonstration videos so you can get like an idea of what this thing looks like in 3D space. hand in actually designing the object, but when it actually came to the marketing materials, it was so hard to convey what that product was because it's truly never been done. It has like a 30 series graphics card in it. It's super powerful. It's super portable. And so the two slides that I want you to recall is one, connecting to seemingly unrelated things, and then that original influence slide, things that were important in my life early on. I don't think anyone here remembers when the internet looked like that, but forum signatures, I've always been really inspired by just how crazy some of those are. That's ASCII art, and that's also Hatsune Miku. And then also fighting games. Like fighting games were always kind of like something that I cared about. So that was that's a screenshot from Tekken 5, I think. So remember those things. And so when I was coming up with what the marketing should look like, those were the references I literally pulled from. So understanding how ASCII art or like how people actually interfaced with computers early on, how could we subvert that type of language and bring it into like a billboard ad? And just using some of the design elements here. So this looks like totally crazy. Or like, what if we actually represented the back of the computer, which is just a crazy part, just with ASCII characters and using some of the crazy design language that Raph designed. How can we use those almost as portals or windows to showcase the product? And you know, this is a pretty unique case. Most companies would never allow you to do this, but we don't even show the actual front of the computer on this. So just like really bold ideas and, you know, sort of kind of tapping into that matrix idea, but more realistically, ASCII art and actual physical input, understanding how someone might interface with an object and using that to create a visual motif. And then finally, if you remember on that slide, I really like fighting games.
Lloyd Tyler versus Errolson. Stare into the void bites back. Get ready, fight! Will you rise above the void? Only one shall win. Double knockout?
So clearly not a typical object, and we needed something that was pretty atypical to talk about. Okay, so as we come around the bend here, I want to just demystify or go back some of the layers about how to actually get work done. I'm killing it with these memes today, people. Happy about that. So yeah, let's demystify some of the work here. So I never understood how my design heroes created so much work, solved so many problems, and did it so fast. I think the secret lies within people's routines and how you spend your morning, how long you spend doom scrolling. But let's dive into that a little bit more. Like I said, when I was in everyone's position here, that's where that's where I wanted to be. I couldn't even understand how someone might get to that. Like, I didn't even know what the next step looked like. I didn't know what 3 steps out looked like. And just seeing all these like crazy impressive portfolios, it's like, oh my God, I will never get there. I don't even know how you would start a project like that, building out a 3D fighting game for a laptop. Like, I just don't understand. And it's okay to feel like this. But knowing that you don't have a skill set, or knowing that you want to get better means you have taste. That's what that delta is. Otherwise, you can, do product design for Citibank. And a lot of people do this, but what does it really mean to observe and take things in? Observation is the first step to developing taste. And I think maybe this is not a good example, but it's like, there's a saying, it's like, don't trust a skinny chef. It's like, don't trust the designer who doesn't observe. And taste isn't something you were born with. I think I often got that confused, but it is something that you can grow by observation. And just constantly creating and developing and understanding what resonates with your audience and what doesn't. And bonus points for all of those who will eventually learn how to communicate the value of good taste. Those are the people who will be really set up. So when we go back to this graph here and we zoom in, it's actually not a straight line. It's a staircase or a ladder. And so when you zoom in, it's actually about this sort of zigzag pattern. And you want to learn, which one's the up and which one's the sideways, it doesn't matter, but you want to learn and observe, always be learning and observing. And then you want to take those applications and execute. And do a project, or do something, or try and apply those skills. And it doesn't matter if you feel lost, and it doesn't matter if you feel like that project is going nowhere. It doesn't even matter really if you finish it. But always do the latter. Because as long as you're learning and observing, and then executing, you will have this trajectory, I promise. It's better than staying stagnant. Always move. And even throughout that process as you zoom in, I think a lot of you, it's normal to feel like an imposter. There are way worse things to be than an imposter, to be an asshole. And people don't want to work with assholes. People want to work with people that they like. So when I think about what originality and creativity means today, and what it means in sort of the modern context, when you look back at that internet design slide, a lot of originality is context. And I think you see a lot of mood board, Instagram accounts, these are the new creative directors. And it kind of goes back to that bleakness in design and how there's not a lot of stuff to look forward to necessarily. So I think that's why a lot of these accounts gain traction and they get very popular. And you see apps that try and do film emulation. And when we do our mock-ups, we make them look like they're wrapped in plastic or on paper, because those are old things, paper and plastic. Those might not exist in the future. So it's grasping onto that is something that us creatives can do. So finally, I want to bring up the late great Virgil Abloh. I used to think he was a great designer, to be honest. And I kind of thought it was gimmicky. But in retrospect, understanding his practice and understanding that he was black in these spaces, and the democratization of what he was doing. This is a triple inception. So originally, one of his off-white bags, he would have the quotes to sort of denote irony, and his bag would say sculpture. And for him to apply that similar motif in one of the most accessible places in the world, that being IKEA, I think is actually quite phenomenal. And understanding his references and how he materialized these things is what I had to do for me to understand his creative genius. I think a lot of people overcomplicate things. And if the choice is, and for those of you doing your thesis or a capstone, narrow your focus and execute a simple idea beautifully. Be a maker, don't be an IG, mood board guy. We got enough of those. Just being able to focus on one core idea that's very simple and being able to execute it to scale in a really sort of visually pleasing manner, I think is worth so much more these days than trying to overcomplicate it. If you can't pitch it in 3 seconds, it's probably too complicated. This is my nice way of saying go touch grass, go look beyond the world of digital design. If you're privileged enough, go travel, go observe other people's culture, understand people's motives. The thing that I thought was most interesting about today's conversations were people would show me the work and I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. What else are you into? And then people would light up. Oh, I'm really into photography. Oh, I'm really into reality television. And understanding what makes something outside of your medium good or why you might be excited about it is going to be worth its weight in gold, and you should bring that sort of thought process when you're looking at your own work. I think mood boarding is fine, but try and stay off Arena, try and stay off Pinterest, go look beyond, and I would also encourage, I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm pretty sure like all the papers I wrote were just like off Wikipedia, just like go down the sources and then pretend I was using those. But look beyond the internet, like seriously, especially when it comes to visual stuff, understand why someone put something in a book and took the time and effort to put something on a page. It really means a lot, and that sense of permanence, I think, shouldn't be underrated. So go touch grass. This is a great quote. Juice versus sauce. I don't know if anyone's seen that sort of Best Buy employee when he's talking about it. But juice versus sauce. When you think of the fridge, what do you got in the front of the fridge? You got juice. Juice, quick to acquire and also quick to go. Sauce is the stuff at the back of the fridge. That stuff is lasting a long time. If you've ever gone to your grandma's house, there's probably some sauce there. All of that is to say, tool doesn't make a designer. The things that I was talking about where it's like bringing in sort of your own POV or being able to connect the dots, those are the type of critical design skills that will give you sauce, and it will allow you to transcend tools. Something that people talked about today, to me specifically, is like AI and how that, how it feels, and it adds to the bleakness for sure. But I think that when someone feels threatened by AI or like these systems or these new tools, understanding why someone feels threatened by it is even more integral, and it allows you to sort of be a part of that conversation. And I'm not saying don't use tools. Like, I've had a lot of creative directors who don't understand how to use Photoshop, they can barely make a deck, they don't know how to use Google Slides. Don't be that person. But understanding how tools work and what tools do will help you communicate better, it'll help you break down barriers, and it'll also make you not like SpongeBob, so it'll make you tool agnostic. A common question I get, finally, is how do you stay inspired? And that, like the Hulk, I don't. I'm actually virtually never inspired. I never feel inspired by anything. And yeah, I would say I feel inspired maybe once or twice at best a month, maybe not even. I think that's generous. And clearly being inspired once a month or like once a quarter or whatever, that's not enough to constantly be creative. Creativity and design isn't about having that light bulb moment or being able to bottle lightning. It's actually a constant application of all the principles that you probably already know, and thinking about that ladder is a great way to think about it. So constantly consume, understand the context, and infusing your own sort of experiences to come up with novel solutions is the way. Don't wait to be inspired. I promise you it will not come. Don't wait for inspiration. Discipline. Discipline's your bestie. So we're wrapping up here. So here's what my practice is. I wanted to bring this back again. Memes, brand, design, culture, understanding how all those things sort of intersect. And when you're thinking about your vocation, if people know what Ikigai is, the Japanese philosophy, maybe here's where my Ikigai is. And I'll end with this graphic here. 2024, I would argue that these are and I'm saying it for the record, might not age well in 2025, but 2024, these were probably the two most iconic and powerful pieces of graphic design. And when you think about what design is, it's design at its most basic elements. It's text on a color. And it represents, obviously, two very different things. You have some of the most potentially progressive and some of the most conservative culture. You have memes from the hyperpop community and the queer community. You have memes from the alt-right. Both have incredible brand equity, but only one of these represents a failed political campaign. So, I hope you guys learned something. I wanted to keep this light. I wanted more time for questions. I'm obviously available to kick around because I went over time, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time, Sammy.